Night isn't just darkness. It's the hour when quiet places remember what they've seen. If you're listening, even a stranger's footsteps can feel like a message meant only for you. Welcome to Midnight Reddit. True stories that don't sleep. Turn down the lights, hit subscribe if you love scary stories, and share your own in the comments. As I was reading some stories one night, I remembered a walk from about 8 years ago. It was after 11 p.m., and I took my dogs out for their last bathroom trip. I lived in a rural area, houses far apart, wooded lots, wild pigs sometimes crossing our path. I would walk longer because one of my dogs had morning accidents if he hadn't had enough time. It was dark, and I had a flashlight. I never expected to meet anyone that late, but a second flashlight appeared ahead on the opposite side of the road. We had few neighbors, and I knew most of them. As I passed the other light, a tall, thin, pale man I'd never seen crossed to my side and started following. He yelled, "Why, hey, I like your dogs. Can I pet them?" I stayed calm, walked faster, and ignored him. I was almost home. He kept calling, "Hey, what's your name? I just want to pet your dogs," in a thick European/Slavic accent. I ran inside, locked the door, told my husband a strange man had followed me and now knew where I lived. My husband ran out with his steel baseball bat. He later came back and said he'd confronted the guy who claimed he was new to town and wanted to make friends. It didn't make sense. My husband told him if he came near our home again, he'd break his knees. I never saw him again until 2 years later in a neighboring city. I was at a museum with a friend, turned a corner, and there he was. He recognized me and said something like, "You're the girl with the dogs from that night," in the same accent. I grabbed my friend's arm and walked away fast. She asked if I knew that creepy guy. I told her the story as we left. I never saw him again. About 3 years ago, I had just moved into a first-floor apartment. It was late and my roommate was out when someone knocked. That wasn't unusual. College friends stopped by at all hours. I looked through the peephole and saw an eyeball pressed against it, which a friend might do as a joke. I chuckled and opened the door, only to see a stranger in his mid-20s, jittery and over-friendly, launching into a fast door-to-door style pitch about the local university. He kept craning his neck to look past me into the apartment, even standing on tiptoes. I declined politely, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. I finally got firm. As I closed the door, he stuck his hand in the way, smiled and said, "I like Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64 too." My roommate and I had been staying up late playing Mario Kart in my bedroom for days, but you couldn't see anything Mario-related from the entrance. I asked how he knew. He stammered, "Oh, I just thought anyone with a couch like that would be into Mario Kart. It's retro." Then he scurried away. We tried to figure it out. The apartment backed up to woods and my blinds were always down. We tested it. The only way to see in was to press your face right up to my bedroom window and angle just right. The console itself was hidden in the TV stand unless we were actively playing, usually around 2 a.m. The only explanation was that he'd been jumping the balcony railing and watching us through the glass at night. I never saw him again, but I checked those windows for a long time. Tonight, my girlfriend and I had a brief but deeply unsettling experience in the lobby of a historic hotel in downtown Oklahoma City. It was bitterly cold and windy, and we just returned from a Thunder game to the hotel where my mother was staying. Around 8:30 p.m., we stepped into the lobby. The building is the restored First National Bank. Marble floors, lavish decor, grand staircase to an upper level where check-in and a restaurant were bustling. But near valet, it felt cold and still. A man leaned against a pillar by the stairs, head tipped down as if he were texting. His phone slipped from his hands and cracked against the marble. He didn't move. His hands stayed in the same position, as if still holding it. I glanced at the phone on the floor, then back up, and he was staring straight at me. The expression on his face was pure disgust. Hollow, malevolent, wrong. I looked away and waited for the elevator. When it arrived, I peeked back. He was still staring. We went up. My mother hadn't noticed anyone. She figured he was on drugs. My girlfriend had seen him too and caught the same look. Minutes later, we headed back down. As the doors opened, he was there, still staring. We walked out. Through the glass doors, I looked back. He had turned to face us fully, eyes locked on mine. We rounded the corner and ran for the car. He didn't follow. Hours later, I can still see that face. I worked in a fast food restaurant a few years ago. In winter, homeless people sometimes came in to warm up. We let them stay if they didn't bother customers. One young guy with an extremely pale expression came in daily for about 2 weeks. He creeped us out because he would just stare at us while we worked. If we glanced his way, he'd look away. He would creak the restroom door open and just stare. Then he stopped showing up. We were relieved and forgot about it, until my boss saw a local article about a young man arrested for attempting to murder his mother, stabbed her a dozen times. It was the same guy. The creepiest moment for me was when I was 19 or 20, in a new state, driving home from a job interview when my car overheated. I'm from Texas, where people still stop to help, so I thought nothing of it when a guy in an 18-wheeler pulled over. I took a ride to get help. He immediately started hitting on me. I told him I was married. He asked if my husband would be okay with me dating him. I said no, and mentioned my husband was in the Navy. He did finally let me out near some state offices, where I got help. Months later, I opened a newspaper and saw his picture on the front page. He'd been arrested, suspected in multiple murders of young men. I never hitchhiked again. When I was 19, I was at a friend's apartment for a party. It was very late, and a few of us stood in the parking lot saying goodbyes. A beat-up Ford Bronco pulled in. A tall, lanky guy in Western garb got out. He didn't go to an apartment. He walked up to us and just stood there, silent. It was weird. We all decided to leave. I drove off. He pulled out behind me. Then he revved his engine, rode my bumper, and flipped on his high beams and light bar. My little 1985 Dodge Omni wasn't outrunning a Bronco. I didn't think to find a police station. It was the early 90s. No smartphone maps. I swerved onto a side street into a poorly lit neighborhood. He followed, but I had a small head start. I killed my lights and drove randomly until I couldn't retrace my own route. When I was confident I'd lost him, I found a main road, turned my lights back on, and went home. I still don't know if it was a drunken prank or something worse. Around August 1978, in my late teens, I was hitchhiking from Illinois to Michigan. A middle-aged man in a pickup stopped on I-94 outside Chicago. He was friendly and talkative. 30 minutes in, I happened to glance down and saw his zipper open with his junk out. I stayed calm and asked him to take the next exit because I felt carsick. He blew past it. I asked again at the next exit, saying I might vomit. He blew past that one too. I realized I had to get out. I reached into my backpack and pretended to grip something, told him it was in his best interest to drop me off, or I'd use what I had. He took the next exit and left me at a gas station. When I was about 15, I was sitting with my ex and a friend at the Little Target food court. An adult man sat with us, said hello, and chatted a minute. Then he asked if we thought it was weird that he joined us. My friend and I nervously said no. My ex said, "Yeah, I think it's weird." He said, "You think it's weird?" She said, "Yes." He replied, "Well, sometimes things happen for a reason." My friend's mom walked over. "Hello?" With that, "Who are you?" tone. He said, "Oh, I was just talking to the kids," stood up and fast walked out of the store. I'm forever thankful for her timing. I was 20 heading back to my car after buying groceries. The driver of the van beside me leaned out and started asking about the books in my back seat. Said I must be in college. He remembered those classes. He leaned farther out, trying to get as close as possible, blocking my path to my car. Then he noticed my t-shirt and talked about the band. Kept going, said he knew which school I went to, that he liked my bumper stickers. I finally worked around him, got in my car, and left. He followed for a while, so I drove in circles until he disappeared. A neighbor later said there'd been a creep attempting kidnappings in the area and to get descriptions and plates if it happened again. I had an experience tonight with a creepy stranger. My friend was selling a laptop on Marketplace and asked me to tag along. We drove to a very dodgy part of town in Durban CBD at 6 p.m. The buyer wasn't where he said he'd be and had us drive around for 40 minutes. He eventually said he was at a supermarket withdrawing cash. We parked and waited. He finally showed up, and things seemed okay until he insisted we prove the laptop charges, despite getting multiple photos and videos earlier. He suggested one of us go with him to test it in the shop, then suddenly changed it to down the road. Red flags everywhere. We asked him to show the cash. He refused and kept his hands in his pockets. I called it off, told my friend to get back in the car, and we left. Just a waste of time and fuel. Thankfully, nothing more. As a kid, I'm convinced I was hanging out around a pile. My family joined a karate dojo. Kids class ran 5 to 5:45, adult class 6 to 7. The 15 minutes between were for chatting. An older guy, maybe late 40s, showed up around 5:30 and watched the kids. He would come right up to us where we sat trading cards and Lego figures and asked to play with our toys. Look at the cards, and he started bringing candy and toys. Maybe he was just lonely, but I remember feeling very uncomfortable. Day hiking the Appalachian Trail with my wife, our first child in a backpack carrier, and our friendly black lab, Cleo, who loved people and stayed close. We stopped to change a diaper. Cleo ran up, pressed into my wife, hackles up, growling softly, very unlike her. A man in his mid-30s came around the bend, disheveled, a little dirty, sneakers and jeans, not a hiker, and we were miles from anywhere. Cleo bared her teeth and growled louder. He skirted around us, watching her, never met my eyes. I thought I saw a dark, wet patch on his shirt hem, not sweat. Cleo stayed behind us the rest of the hike out, always looking back. When we turned around, she took the lead. I was in a small French town on a study abroad, walking home at night. Two buff men in leather jackets blocked my path and spoke rapid French. I said, "I don't speak much French." I had a good accent but little vocabulary. They guessed my nationality, German, Belgian, and couldn't place me. I kept hearing the word passport between them, which put me on edge. I didn't push past or escalate, just kept being socially inept with the language until the moment passed. I think I avoided a mugging by confusing them. About a year after I started my supermarket job at 19, an odd customer asked for a specific alcohol brand. I said I'd check the warehouse. Instead of waiting, he followed right behind me and said, "You've got a sexy ass." He kept asking for my number, getting very close. He said he was 36. I told him I was 17. He said, "Age is just a number." He followed me for 20 minutes, asking for my number, my name, where I lived. I felt cornered. No other staff around. I couldn't raise my voice. He finally left when I got more visibly scared. I told my mom later. She told security and the managers. They couldn't find him on CCTV. I saw him a couple more times after, but security was never nearby. Before my boyfriend and I moved in together, he shared a ground floor flat with a friend and his girlfriend. Across the way lived a man who kept his front door wide open, sometimes all day and night, so you could see inside. The conditions looked awful. He would feed a cat we weren't sure was his. He never spoke, just stared with piercing black eyes. Later, he started screaming in the middle of the night. A neighbor yelled at him to be quiet because he had work in the morning. The man shouted he'd kill him, and I believed him. We found out from a reliable source that he'd been to jail for the rape and murder of a teenage girl. After that, we never left the flat alone at night when his door was open. Eventually, he vanished. The letting agency fixed up the place and rented it to someone else. If online counts, I have a doozy. I run a lifestyle blog about being single. A man from Florida followed and reblogged everything, adding inappropriate comments, so I turned off that feature and asked him to stop. He behaved briefly. I later posted shower thoughts, and he left an inappropriate comment about thinking of me in the shower. I told him that wasn't okay. He lost it and posted 15 to 20 times about me, declared love though we'd never met, said I misled him though we'd only interacted in comments. Within 24 hours, he wrote, "If she kills herself, she'll probably blame me." He ranted about women in general. I reported him, blocked him and his IP, but he could still read via VPN. A month later, he was still whining that I broke his heart. I used to take the bus home from work and get off at the last stop 2 blocks from home around 6 p.m. It was March and already dark. A man sat near the stop just watching people. I crossed the first street and cut through a small used car lot toward the Quick Mart to grab smokes for my roommate. Moving between the cars, I noticed he was following. I waited for traffic at the next street. He stopped too, hiding between cars. I went into the store and out again. He stood at the corner against the light post. I turned toward my apartment and he left the post and followed. I always carry pocket knives at work to open boxes. 2 small folding knives with polished rainbow finishes. I pulled them out, still closed, let him see them, made eye contact, then slid them open, one in each hand. He cocked his head, kept eye contact, and turned away. He might have been creepy, but at least he was smart enough to pick a different target. In high school, I worked at a neighborhood market as a cashier. One older man, 50s, balding, bigger, unkempt clothes, limped in and made direct eye contact with me. He stood near the entrance for about 20 minutes just staring. He finally walked the store, bought a pack of gum at my register, stared silently, and left. A couple of weeks later, I arrived early for my shift and sat outside the deli next door on the phone. He limped across the street staring. He stood in front of me for a minute or two. I waved awkwardly. He said in a raspy voice, "I know you from somewhere." I said, "Yeah, I've seen you at the Walmart." He went into the deli, sat by the window, and stared at me until I left. I didn't see him again. A couple of years ago, I was an account manager at an IT consultancy. Recruiters found a candidate for a long vacant role and asked me to do a second interview. He was well-spoken, well-dressed. When discussing experience, he told me he'd worked for a predatory loan agency. A single mother came in for a loan to replace a water heater and fix a bathroom. He convinced her to finance a full apartment renovation that would take 4/5 of her monthly income. He was proud of it and didn't understand why I wasn't impressed. I didn't hire him. He then stalked the recruiters for a week or two. I was home alone in my early 20s when my parents were away. It was a nice day. The main door was open with the screen door shut. A man knocked and asked where a certain house number was on a nearby street. I pointed down the road and said I wasn't sure. He stared at me in silence for about 10 seconds. I had a TV show on in the background. A moment later, the sound of a baby crying and someone talking came from the TV. He said, "Oh, I'll let you get back to your family," and left. I genuinely believe he was weighing whether to force his way in and change his mind because of the background noise. Another time, a man seemed to follow me to my car and only turned around when he saw my parents waiting for me. What about you? Have you ever crossed paths with a stranger who felt wrong from the first glance? Midnight fades, but the stories don't. See you next time on Midnight Reddit.